Are you actively engaged at work every day? How do you demonstrate it? Do your people realize that you're engaged, or do they think that you're disengaged? According to Gallup, 70% of the workforce is partially or fully disengaged and looking for a change. Well, I believe one of the major contributors to this disengagement is our poor communication and connection record. Yes, we communicate, but it is primarily at a social or surface level. Hence, there is little trust. Social media is also part of this dilemma, so we need to avoid thinking of that as a major or primary means of connecting, because much of what we see and hear on the internet is rapid and shallow. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining me in a whirlwind discussion of John Maxwell's book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. John's philosophy is that to be an effective leader, you must connect with most everyone you are involved with each day. The key is being authentic and intentional in all that you do. Today we're going to take a 10,000-foot overview of the book due to time limitations. However, your company is more than likely multicultural and global today, which makes the whole concept of connecting much more complex. There is much diversity in terms of the body of employees, in terms of ideas, expectations, and needs. Therefore, my goal is not to provide you a step-by-step program or information, but rather to challenge you to think and become more proactive and more creative in your connecting skills. So let's buckle up and launch into it. Let's look at some facts. Let's start with a simple question. How many words do you think the average person speaks every day? Yes, that's right. 16,000 words per day. If all of those words were transcribed, they would fill a 300-page book every week. At the end of the year, you would have filled an entire 8-foot-tall bookcase. But how many of those words mattered? How many will make a difference in someone's life? How can you make your words count more? How many of you today in this room have written a book? How many words were in that book? For example, in my newest book for small business, there are 35,000 words in it. Now, do I believe that every word matters? Yes. But have I reached the point that every one does matter? No. This is something I'm still working on. Can connecting make or break you? The simple answer to that is yes. It is critical to understand this premise in today's workforce. Does everyone communicate to connect? Absolutely not. Not everyone consciously or intentionally engages in connection. In fact, the number is relatively small. In the sea of communications, much is shallow and manipulative, which means trust is low and agreement is hard to find. If you want a fun exercise, just walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, how are you?" and listen to what they say. Chances are it's going to be frivolous communication. So what is connection, and what are some of the connecting principles that John talks about in his book? Connecting is really the ability to identify with people and relate to them in such a way that it increases our influence with them. In other words, connecting is about influence. To demonstrate how we can influence, let's look at the skills that some U.S. presidents have exhibited in terms of influence. Here are 5 that have been documented. The first is vision. They knew where they were going. They had a plan. Second is pragmatism. They had a very practical approach. Third was consensus building. They were able to persuade people to follow. They were able to compromise. Fourth is charisma. They were able to connect with people at a personal level. not just at the role or the job level. And finally was trustworthiness. They did what they said they would do. Now, this is my favorite because this is a skill that's lacking much in today's world. 4 of those skills above help define or make connection. You can see them. They're marked with an asterisk. As an example, how many in this room remember the 1980 Carter and Reagan debates? Looking over this group, my guess is the number will be low. Carter discussed facts and was self-focused, whereas Reagan was engaged with the audience. He addressed the answer to challenges from Carter to the audience, not to President Carter. No wonder he was often called the great communicator. A similar comparison can be made with more recent debates of Clinton and Bush. Clinton was always looking for an opportunity to connect, whereas Bush seemed to miss many opportunities. So what are some more aspects of influence and connection? Are there signals that you can be watching for? These 9 signals are a sampling of what can be observed when one is focused on connecting. Are you aware that these signals are often sent but are failed to be recognized? They're usually sent when people feel that they are confident that you can connect, that you're on a level of attitude or intelligence or compassion or emotion that allows for connecting to take place. So it primarily starts with attitude. The ability to connect with people, with other people, begins with the understanding of the value of people. Jim Collins in Good to Great observes, those who build great companies understand that the ultimate throttle on growth for any great company is not markets or technology or competition or products. It is the one thing above all others, the ability to get and keep enough of the right people. You do this by connecting with these people. You need to understand what connection is and how it's recognized by people. The 9 signals are a good place to start. When one or more of these occur, how do you react when you sense it? How do you demonstrate your response? If you are aware of them and react to them in a positive manner, you will begin to experience deeper connections. But you must build a win-win environment. For example, when someone is extremely open to you in a conversation, indicating that they feel they can connect with you, do you consider this a privilege or pain? Remarkably, the latter does occur. How you react is reflected in your eye contact or body language long before the words come out. Now you have a choice, as with any of these 9 signals. When you see unguarded openness, people are trusting. When you see that there's enjoyable experience being taken here, you need to take advantage of that. When you see unconditional love, it is something to lock into and connect. Now in Principle 2, John discusses the fact that the core of connection is really in how you value others first. And that's part of what we just discussed. Connecting principle number 2 is about others. Connecting should never be about me, but rather it should be about the person with whom I am communicating. A friend of mine has written a book on social media that is entitled, It's Not About You, It's About Bacon. Now the bacon refers to others and how you can establish good social networking relationships that are profitable for your business and your friendship, but only if you care for the other person first. How are we tripped up when it comes to our focus? The simplest factor is immaturity. Immaturity basically sets us up so that we can't see or act on behalf of others. Our only focus is internal. Secondly, ego is more dominant when we are striving for success at all cost, We can only care what someone can do for us rather than what we can do for them. We need to check our egos at the door. Failure to value others not only leads to no connections, but it also leads to distrust and disengagement in the workplace. Now, just to complicate the issue a bit more, when people are communicating with you, they are asking themselves the three perception connection questions above. The first one is, do you care for me as a person, employee, or friend? Now, how do you answer that one? How do your people perceive that you answer that question for them? The second one is, can you help me accomplish what we need to get done? Or in actuality, what I need to get accomplished? Can you help me get that done? And the last and probably the most important is, can I trust you? It's a fundamental question. Will you do what you said you were going to do? Now, we have issues with this last question in today's world. Commitments are considered casual and in some cases irrelevant. But in my world, they are very, very important, as they are in the whole concept of relationship capital, which is rapidly becoming a buzzword within the industry today. Now that we have our focus on others, let's look at the next principle, which deals with the other facets of communications. For example, it goes beyond words. Now, face-to-face implies that there is more to conversation and communication than just words. And that's reflected in the diagram on this slide. It includes all the facets. The key to remember is that according to research, 7% of what we say in terms of the words will have an impact. Words we use are only part of the picture when it comes to connecting. People are much more interested in the way that we say something, how we say it, how they hear it. Covers areas like tone, inflection, speed, volume. They also significantly count on what they see in terms of body language, facial expression, gestures. They're all part of the picture of connection. Now, you're basing your interpretation of my message today on these very same criteria. This being said, that is 93% of what is involved in communication and connection is based on more than words we use. We find out that we spend a lot of time thinking about what words to use, but we spend so little time being concerned about how we say them and what body language we use to present them. Complicated? It only sounds that way. The key is it does require intentionality on your part. Our bigger challenge today is that in the virtual world, we must find other ways of increasing our effectiveness. How do we encounter that portion of communication that rely on physical presence? This is only one of the reasons for the rise of telepresence in the corporate world, so there can be some visual impact. Now, this will continue to be a challenge for us as we continue on in this century. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about energy. Why would that be a principle? Energy is definitely a connecting principle. How convincing can you be if there's no energy in your voice, actions, or thoughts? How can you expand your influence to larger groups if you don't have the energy? This fourth principle of energy is crucial to success. Trust me, success in connecting requires energy. If you consider yourself a communicator, you will have to deal with the four possible unpardonable sins shown above. The first one is being unprepared. Preparation is a major part of any type of interaction connection, whether it be to an audience or to workplace cohorts or even in a person-to-person conversation. Practice makes it work. Practice allows you to meet schedules. It takes practice, practice, practice. and it takes energy to practice. The second point is being uncommitted. In my point of view, if you're not committed, don't even open your mouth. It takes energy to commit to something and make it stick. So you need to be caring about what you're saying and why, and be committed to it before you ever expound on it. Third is being uninteresting. Now, this is always a struggle because you don't ask the right questions. We always need to try to be interesting. This means you need to know your audience, know what they're looking for, and how they want to hear it. This demands that you ask questions and listen before you actively participate. The last one is being uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, your audience will be uncomfortable, even if the audience is only one person. Now, we also list 5 requirements for connecting, and these are related to use of energy. The first is initiative. Being proactive and taking initiative starts the whole process, and this is a critical energy use. Clarity. Learn to be concise and clear. Patience. Patience always requires energy. If you've got kids, you understand this. Patience is the key to intentionality. Selflessness is required to think about others. Stamina is energy dependent. Think recharge. Keeping these in mind as you attempt to connect will help make it better and make it more intentional. Yes, there are repeats, but we learn from repeating. The final principle is that connecting is recognizing that it is a skill. Yes, there are components where talent can enhance a skill, but for the most part, it is a skill that can be learned. And so we're going to look at that briefly here now. Now, these are the 5 components of connecting. How well you learn and exercise within these areas is critical. Relationships, it's based on who you know. Do you treasure them, or do you let them slide? Do you let them dangle? Sacrifice, are you willing to bend over to help people that are in need other than yourselves? Are you willing to go that stretch mile to help someone else? Are people able to see your value by how you live? Can you see how they value you by the sacrifices you make? Insights are critical. Do you have insights into job expertise, leadership roles, or industry levels? Do you have personal insight that you can share with others that is meaningful and non-judgmental? Success. Do you have a catalog of successes? Not to brag, but to use for reference when attempting something new. Demonstrate ways that have worked for you in the past as examples, not solutions. Ability. Can you demonstrate your abilities when necessary? Are they current, relevant, and practical? Now, all of these must be involved, exercised, and utilized on a regular basis for connection to be truly successful. Now, this wraps up the 5 principles, and we move on now into the area of practices. This gets to be the down and dirty, the simple tactics that you can use to grow in connecting. Our first connecting practice is one of finding common ground. Now, on this slide, you'll see 8 different topics and methodologies that you can use to find common ground. And yes, each of them are a choice. And all of them involve you making choices. For example, availability. Should you choose to spend time with others? Yes. Listening. You can listen your way to common ground, but you have to truly listen with both ears. Questions. You should be interested enough in others to ask relevant and perceptive questions. Thoughtfulness. You must think of others and look for ways to help them. Openness, you need to let people into your life. Be vulnerable, transparent. And this is a scary factor, but it's well worth the investment. Likability, you need to care about people because if people think you care about them, they will like you. This is a formula that Zig Ziglar has talked about for years. Humility, you should think of yourself less so you can think of others more. And finally is adaptability. You need to intentionally move from your world to theirs. Make the effort. Cross the road. All of these things can help you find common ground with anyone, but it will require some discipline, patience, and compassion. Other barriers? Yes, but we won't go into those today. Those are for another discussion. On a side note, you can begin to see the common threads to the principles in the practices, starting with this slide. In practice 2, we move on to understanding simplicity. Now I subscribe to the KISS principle when it comes to simplicity, except my version is keep it simple, students. I happen to hate using the word stupid, so with that, we need to remember that we are all students, or at least we should be when it comes to human communications. The 4 H's above on the slide show the flexibility within any communication and areas that you can help influence higher and greater communication. One is humor. Humor is always a good tactic. The key is it should be good humor and it should be tasteful. As you can see from my discussion, I don't use humor much because most of my jokes, when I do start on them, usually flop before I get to the punchline. So knowing when to use humor is key to bringing a simple message. Speaking from the heart is vital. I'm usually authentic in what I discuss because I believe it and I practice it. Very simple rules to apply. But to really believe it, you do have to live it. When you look at hope and help, these two I combine together because we need to go out of our way to encourage and execute both. People need to see hope in each and every presentation you do, in each and every discussion you have. And they need help. They may not be asking for it verbally, but they probably are asking in other ways. Are you observant enough to see that? Now, the 2 other areas are the 3 S's of simplicity. They're relatively simple when you look at them. Now, I don't have any trouble with any of the 3 except number 2. I do have a tendency to speak rapidly, so I have to consciously turn down the speedometer. The art of simplicity is simple. Talk to people not above them. Great advice. Get to the point. Talked about that one before. Say it over and over and over again. We do learn by rote. Say it clearly and say less. Don't surround it with a bunch of frivolous words. Speaking clearly and speaking less, they're self-explanatory, as I mentioned. So take it to heart. The next practice is to provide your connection with an experience worth them spending time with you. Connecting practice number 3, being experience, is relatively new in today's marketplace, but retail has been struggling with it the last decade. With the growth of online purchasing, a lot of areas have become commodity-based buying. You can sit at home, you can sit in front of your computer, and without any interaction, you can order the needs that you have, including food, medical, whatever the case may be. So when you do go out shopping, you go out shopping looking for an experience that is going to be positive it's going to be uplifting, and it's going to be unique. So that's the issue that brick and mortar retail is beginning to struggle with today. How do I make your experience when you come into my store unique? How do I make it rewarding? How do I make it somewhere you want to come back to again? Now, the same is true when we're connecting. When you have a conversation with somebody, you need to give them a reason to want to come back and talk to you. If you leave them flat, chances are you're not going to be able to re-engage. Do you provide an experience when you talk to people? What are your expectations for experience when you're talking to someone? Trust me, you do have them. This is a simple yet very profound concept. It's one of those that is simple or easier said than done. The 5 points that you see on the screen are: take responsibility for your listeners. So often we don't do this. Communicate in their world. We talked about that before. Capture people's attention from the start. And lastly, you need to speak it so that it sticks. Can only be done if it's authentic and if it is reliable. After we discuss experience, and there's more that can be discussed on this topic, but we move on now to inspiration. And let's take a look at how we inspire people after we've given them an experience. Now, when it comes to inspiration, John gives us this formula, which is very, very simple. It must be part of your DNA. You need to be present for this formula to work and provide connections that are solid and sustainable. The key is keeping your focus when dealing with multiple connections. If you'll note above, people need to know that you understand them and that you are focused on them. And what do they need? Like I said, they need to know that you understand them, that you're focused on them, that you have high expectations for them. People need to see that you have conviction and that you provide a positive example of what is expected. People need to feel your confidence in yourself, but also in them. They need to know that you appreciate them and have gratitude for what they do. If they don't, this part of the formula falls apart. If any of these are missing, inspiration is shallow. And this is one of those pieces of the puzzle that is so vital that we miss many times because we don't take time to think through these three parts of the puzzle. So I just encourage you, take this slide to heart. Now, once inspired, the last principle that we're going to deal with is really a deal maker or breaker. And it's a topic of credibility, because this is what we're leading up to with all of this discussion of connection. Being credible is a fitting place to end this discussion, since everything that we have cajoled and turned over and talked about culminates in our being credible. The checklist provided in this slide is it's a starting point. That's about it. I have added a keyword next to each item that can be used as a reminder of what the outcome should be focused on to be successful. For example, the first one, how I connect with myself and others, talks about commitment and being able to keep your word with yourself and others. The second question is, have I made right my wrongs? Have I forgiven? Am I forgiven? Again, a major part of being vulnerable and being open, transparent. Third is basically it's saying, am I accountable? Am I responsible? Do I accept that accountability and responsibility? You're being watched in this area continuously. Fourth, do I lead like I live? Authenticity. Is what people see in you at work the same thing they will see from you in the shopping center, on the playground, at home if they go to your home? It should be consistent, and that's why we tie this together with authenticity. Fifth, do I tell the truth? Only word I can tie to this one is integrity. Because if you're not telling the truth, then you have to decide at which point do I let go of this or let go of that because I'm being found out. And telling the truth just avoids the whole concept of having to be uncovered. Hence, when I look at it and say integrity, I'm looking at it meaning that it has to be part of your DNA. Sixth, am I vulnerable? Am I transparent? Transparency makes connections much more effective. Being vulnerable is tough, especially for us as men. But it is very, very healthy for relationships. Seventh, am I following the golden rule? Do I have compassion on others? Do I have compassion on fellow workers? Do I have compassion on my family? Do I have compassion in general? Do I care? And does it show? Eighth and finally, do I deliver results? Only word here is productivity. Now in business, we're very well endowed with having this word in our vocabulary because it's the thing that investors are always looking for. But I put them last in the list because of the simple fact that I think you should do the other 7 before you ever get to the bottom and talk about results. So let me leave you with a question. Are you credible? Do you connect? Are you authentic? Are you transparent? These are all valid questions when it comes to connection, and something that you need to keep in mind when you go forth and go into the workplace from this meeting or from any other meeting. So let's wrap up. This slide is nothing more than a recap of our discussion today. Connecting is really all about influence, first of all. Connecting begins when the other person feels valued. The more you do to go beyond words, the greater the chance you will have of connecting with people. The larger the group you're trying to connect with, the more energy it's going to take to connect to more and multiple people. The skills you learn to connect with at one level can be used for connecting at the next level, but they need to be intentional, but not phony. Know the reasons you and your listener want to communicate and build a bridge between them. This is talking about finding that common ground. Work to create the experiences from your communication settings, your environments. Once you set the right experiences, it will be a vibrant conversation that will take place. What people remember most from a conversation or a discussion such as this is how you made them feel. Did they challenge me? Did they make me feel sad? Did they make me feel mad? Did they make me feel happy? One way or another, we affect people when we talk and when we connect. You need to know how that takes place. Finally, the only way to keep connecting with people is to live what you communicate. In other words, what you see from me today is what you see from me when you run into me in the store, when you see me at a chamber meeting. Any place that you see me, I'm going to be basically the same person that you see talking to you today. And that's all I can ask from this discussion. Now, granted, we haven't had a lot of time to get into the details, but I think I've given you an overview of what John's thoughts are And I would love to be able to experiment with it more and to really open up during a mastermind or other presentation vehicle. So when we look at my next slide, you will see my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to check my website, any one of the first two. Check my blog site. I blog once a week, and there's always a topic on leadership taking place. You can call me. My telephone number is 630-935-3326, or you can email me at ron@transformativeleadership.us. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you all. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned. And more importantly, I hope I challenged you today to be intentional about connection.